Swords. Swords. Swords.
So the X-Men have swords now, and it is great. The recent crossover of X-Men, 10 of Swords, that is, just wrapped up, and oh my god, was it so fun. And, I'm sure a lot of you are here from my most popular video about this current X-Men run. So, A, thank you for sticking around. B, that was on the Krakoa entering the world stage, and that was a great single issue. This crossover, which is really the second full crossover of Dawn of X, considering House and Powers was the first one, it's so dang good, man. You got X-Men with all their swords protecting Krakoa, going to Otherworld to fight, and then fighting the new Arakko characters, some great new characters for this series, and for the X-Men series as a whole. It was just so good. And then it kind of positions itself, making you think it's going to be a Mortal Kombat style, contest of champions, almost. Marvel title there. But it actually ends up being essentially like a game of Mario Party. It's so fun in that way. But I want to talk about, the swords. They're in the name. There's a lot of them, 20 in total, from 10 from each side. So I wanted to be here today to rank them. Rank the 10 of swords, despite the fact that there's 20. But there's only 19 spots. So ignore those little things and let's get on with it. So all swords from Krakoans and Arakkos are Arakians. Forget what the possessive is of that. They're all eligible. Also, there will be heavy spoilers. So go read 10 of Swords right now, because I don't want you being spoiled from this, even though it's so good. And yeah, this is mainly going to be focusing on their design, what they do in the story, and, just kind of my own subjective opinion, because this isn't like a hard list, like, oh, this sword is better than this one because, it has these attributes. It's more just like, nah, this one looks cooler, and this one cuts people up cooler. Like, this is not one of my more, in-depth analytical things. This is me talking about some cool swords. All right, so coming in last, number 19, is the Muramasa blade, held by Solemn, because it's just a sword we've already seen before with Wolverine, and it really is nothing special to him. It also just kind of looks like a regular sword. It's not that crazy. And Solemn really doesn't do anything. I know they're kind of setting him up as more of a villain for, future part of Wolverine series, but in Ten of Swords, he really doesn't do that much, so, no harm, no foul. Solemn, kind of lame. Number 18 is the Muramasa blade from Wolverine, and yeah, it's pretty much the same problems with it before. With Solemn, like, it's not the most, design-wise, it's not the coolest thing. Also, we've seen it before a bunch. It's like the only thing that, with Wolverine, it's like, oh, he can get killed. But the thing that's interesting is we already have that threat of, Wolverine could die here if his healing factor doesn't work. So the Muramasa blade, it's the only thing that can attack Wolverine. A, it doesn't come into play with Solemn, and B, it doesn't really come into play with any of the other Iraqis. So it doesn't really do much. It doesn't change the dynamic here. It's just like Wolverine has another sword in addition to the 6 small ones he has from his hand. So after that is Alluvium from Redroot the Forest. And while this is a cool sword that looks almost kind of like a cleaver, it's not used at all. There's like one panel where she's pointing it towards her teammates when they're recruiting her, and then later she gets captured in a glass bottle. So, well, I think that's a fun little thing, and kind of shows the craziness of Mad Jim Jaspers, who's going to be in Reign of X. That's going to be sick. She doesn't do anything with the sword, so cool design, puts you ahead of the Muramasa blades. Nothing really else does. Next up is Scarab, which is Apocalypse's blade, and it's like, wow, that's such a crazy thing, Apocalypse, he's this great guy, and it's like, oh, I know, and the sword was assembled in 4 parts, and they each represent different things, but honestly, it's kind of underwhelming, the sword, the 4 parts, they're the backstory, but once he gets the sword, it's just kind of a giant Khopesh, which, while cool, while fitting his themes of, the Egyptian stuff, it doesn't necessarily go that much further in the design aspects, and once it's actually used in combat, it's broken pretty handily by Annihilation, so it just doesn't hold up that much, Normally, one of the coolest swords there, but also it's normally one of the only swords around, so Apocalypse, you gotta step up your game, man. Next up, number 15 is the Sword of Might, the new sword that creates Captain Avalon. So, I'm gonna be honest, I never really got the whole Captain Britain and Excalibur stuff. I can get into most weird X-Men stuff, but that just never really hooked me. But, so yeah, this is kind of, it's, the sword design-wise is just like the very, it really hits like the stereotypical, like, knight in shining armor, that kind of blade. But I gotta give it props. Captain Avalon, cool design. Kind of like seeing that, as a parallel to Captain Britain. And it looks pretty cool in the last issue of Ten of Swords, so I can give it that. But other than that, nothing crazy, but it kind of edges itself out over the less interesting competition. After that, at number 14, we've got Colony, which, if you had to ask what the grandson of Apocalypse would have for his sword, I mean, that's a pretty fair estimate. You know, all the spikes and how edgy it looks like. I could totally see that. After that is the double combo for number 13 of God Killer and Grass Cutter, which, can I just talk about the names? One of those is very different than the other. Like, I could call my lawnmower Grass Cutter and, like, nobody would bat an eye. If I called it God Killer, I'd get a few more questions. So these two are wielded by Gorgon, and they're basically just one and the same. And I gotta say, Gorgon, Hickman did a great job of a character that I did not care about and be like, huh, no, I kind of care about him, but also he's dead. But, you know, one thing we see with this is it goes back to his line in X-Men number 5, where he was like, you know, oh, the fault that you have is by believing that the swords that I wield are swords, when in reality I am the sword. Again, he's just the dude who's like, I studied the blade, but in real life. But here he backs it up, you know? With both swords, he takes out, like, you know, I don't know, 10, 12, something like that, of the white sword's 100 people army. More into that later. And it's pretty sick, you know, him basically soloing them to get the lead to Krakoa. The swords don't do, like, an insane amount. They're not the greatest, you know, like, they're not super stylistically designed, but I don't know, it's just pretty solid combo right there. And I think that, you know, that helps Gorgon in his death cement his place as being pretty cool. Number 12 is the Blackbone of Amduat, which is basically, you know, he's Death. He looks like the Egyptian version of Death, and so his sword is named the Bone, and I find that kind of funny. I also like its kind of like swoopy design that it's got. I'm a big fan of that part. Other than that, it doesn't do an insane amount, but like, you just gotta give him some solid points for fitting his aesthetic. Next up at number 11 is the sword of probably my new favorite character, or one of my new favorite characters from Ten of Swords, Iska the Unbeaten, her sword Mercy. And this one, it's just so cool. I mean, it plays off her, you know, the sword being called Mercy, but she really doesn't show mercy because she's always unbeaten. I like that little dynamic. I'm always, you know, sucker for wordplay like that. But yeah, Iska's, I mean, I love her. There's not a video about her. She's great. Excited to see what happens there. But her sword is just, it's cool because it kind of fits her design of, you know, the lines and circles on her armor. It has a very similar aesthetic to that, as well as just, you know, it's like some of the swords, they're just like, what if it was a sword, but bigger? And hers is kind of smaller than that. It's, you know, you can see it being wielded more, effectively and, you know, faster paced. So it's got that going for it. But other than that, it doesn't do an insane amount, except for how it literally destroys reality and kills Captain Britain. That was pretty sick. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I thought that was an awesome moment. And so, you know, and with Iska, it's like, oh, but that makes her evil. It's like, everybody messes up from time to time. Like, literally, Apocalypse was one of the main characters of this X-Men story. So we can forgive her for that one. Now, in number 10, the top 10 is the Midnight Blade. This is the sword of the big bad Annihilation, not Genesis Annihilation, like the mask. And it's pretty cool. It's got, you know, it's like summonable type thing. I don't know, it's just, this sword has gotten to this point basically because of just, it's like, it looks really cool. And it's pretty powerful. It's pretty dang powerful. Able to destroy Apocalypse's sword, almost take out Apocalypse, and I mean, it's just tight. And then also, you can almost count Annihilation being turned into like a spear at the end. That's pretty cool. Excited for 10 of Spears coming 2024. But yeah, the Midnight Blade, it just embodies, you know, what this X-Men event is, which is like, what if we do cool stuff? And it works out well. At number 9, Vermilion, the Red Sword of War. This one, taking the same principles as Midnight Sword. It's got one thing, and I think that thing is cool. It's a sword that can catch on fire. And if you don't think that's awesome, I mean, just what's wrong with you? So yeah, that's all my justification I have for this one, and I feel like that's all the justification I really need. It's a flaming sword. That's cool. Number 8 is the Starlight Sword. As we continue with ones that I think just look cool, don't necessarily do the most in the story, but I think they look cool, so I'm putting them here. And this one, with the Iska thing where she shattered Captain Britain, I think this is why, because it's like the omniversal sword or whatever. Again, I'm not the biggest Captain Britain or Excalibur guy. Don't totally know if there's a precedent for that. But it looks awesome. Like it looks like it's made of light, and it's got like, you know, the little spikes on the you know, near the hilt, so it looks cool, and it like, you know, shatters into different realities. Pretty cool. Again, that's all my justification I have there. Now at number 7 is Skybreaker, and that's Storm Sword, and this was from Wakanda actually, and it can help, you know, it's made of vibranium, and I think this is really where we hit like the best of the best swords. Like, they look cool, they do cool stuff. You know, it's really the perfect package. But this one, it like can enhance her elemental abilities. It's a super cool figurehead for Wakanda. And it, obviously it's setting up a future plotline with Wakanda, which I am super hyped for. But it's just got all this stuff going on. And it's more of a dagger than a full-on sword, which is awesome. And it can do the Medusa reflect thing, which is how Storm beats death by reflecting his own face back at him. It's just a really cool sword that also kind of goes back to Storm's thieving days, with the Claremont run, how he kind of, had her being a thief when she was younger, and it goes back to that with, the dagger and being able to be quick and more agile with it fighting. So yeah, pretty dang sick. Number 6 is Seducer, the sword of Bay the Blood Moon. And it's almost more like a spear, which is awesome. And she doesn't actually use it to fight her person she's challenged with, because that's Cypher, and they get married. Good for them, the happy couple. But later in the final one shot, it's pretty awesome. In Destruction, Ten of Swords Destruction, she throws it like a boomerang thing. Yeah, it's so cool, and she just chops down waves of stuff. It may technically be a spear, but I'm just going to say it's a sword with a really long hilt, and that's good enough for me. Now we are at the final 5 swords, the best of the best. Really, any of these you can make an argument for being the coolest, and I would probably be able to agree with you. You'd probably be able to sway me. Again, there's not much reasoning behind mine, but here is the Light of Galador. That's Cable's sword, and it's an awesome sword from space that, is an energy conduit, that it can shoot lightning and just kinetic bolts, I guess, through. That's, the stereotypical one. But also, it's a giant battery for the giant sword. That's the honorable mention, by the way, the sword station, because nobody technically wields it. But if you have to give it to someone, give it to Cable here. So yeah, the giant sword, or the Light of Galador can power the giant sword station as a battery, and at least that awesome moment in the final where it's those weird technological virus dudes are coming through and attacking all the waves of Arakan, monsters. It's so dang cool, and without the Light of Galador, we wouldn't have gotten that set piece. Number 4, that's Purity, the sword of the white sword of the Ivory Spire. And listen, this dude's got sword in his name, so clearly he knows what's going on. He also has a sword that is basically just Cloud's Buster Sword from Final Fantasy VII, and I can respect that. It's, it's awesome. He goes full anime villain with the way he always, he sits like that, and he lets a bunch of his own dudes get murdered just to hear his allies beg for his help. And he's got the giant sword, and he's just so cool. He stabs through Gorgon with it. This is how you do a cool big sword. And so yeah, again, he actually does stuff with it, and it's cool. It's giant. I also love how at the end of Destruction, he just dips, because he's I showed up, I did my part. You guys can have the war. I just want to fight a few people. And dude, mad respect to that guy. He's I did my part. Peace out. See you at the after party. Maybe, if you're all alive. Now we are at the top 3. Number 3 is Warlock. Warlock as a sword. Have you ever wished your best friend could be a sword? If you have, that's kind of weird. But hey, this is what happens with Warlock. We get this shown in New Mutants 13, which is a great just standalone issue even, outside of the Ten of Swords. And it shows, Warlock being I will help fight for you, because it's on Cypher. And also, I just love, whoever made the design choice, I think it was Rod Reyes, who did the first arc of New Mutants, the design of having Warlock be Cypher's arm. It looks so cool, and the fact that he can pop out a sword like that, it's just awesome. And then the design has the cool black with yellow technological streaking with Warlock, and it's since Cypher doesn't actually have to fight with it, he gets a built-in best man, which that's pretty great. That's pretty neat. Now at number 2, we have the Soul Sword, which is the most iconic sword of X-Men. It's magic sword, and it's just, what can you say about it that, hasn't already been shown? It's awesome, helps her with the portal, with demons, with fire, just looks cool. Magic with a giant sword is easily the coolest look magic could ever have. Stabs people, opens portals. This opens that giant portal that has that splash page of all the X-Men coming out. Now that is an awesome scene. But yeah, it's the coolest sword in all traditional X-Men stuff, the coolest sword out of any of the pure X-Men. And yeah, I love it. But it's not quite the best in Ten of Swords. And that's because the best goes to number 1, my boy, Pogg, your Pogg! Literally, there's no one else you could have given it to. You think, oh, what? He's just got, giant swords, kind of like Scarab, but giant. No, because his swords are not his sword. Well, those are his swords. He's got 2 sets of swords. He's got those swords, and he's got 4 of them. But also, the alligator is the sword. What? Dude, it's mind-blowing, and it's incredible. Inside is just a little goblin dude, and, some people will be like, hey, that sucks. It's hey, I love goblins. Goblins are great. So, just another plus on the scale for me. But Pogg, your Pogg, this giant alligator dude, he's got, the red, I don't know what it is, armor, crystalline, whatever. He's got, so many arms. Alligators just, in general, are awesome. Pogg Ur-Pogg is the best, I think, character from Ten of Swords, but easily the best sword from Ten of Swords. And that one is a fact. The other things you can debate, but this is a fact, you can't deny my man Pogg Ur-Pogg. So I cannot wait for his ongoing series. I hope that it's going to be written by Jonathan Hickman and it's going to be integral to the rest of the X-Men series that he writes. So I cannot wait for that one. Big fan of that, hopefully future idea. But in all seriousness, thank you everyone for watching. Go read Ten of Swords if you read this, or if you watched this without reading it. It's so cool. Or at least, if you're going to wait for the trade, do that. But it is such a good story. It is one of the best X-Men crossovers, in years. Despite House and Powers, those are obviously incredible. But, if you look past those, one of the best. It's so fun. And it keeps, it's got the new spirit and ideas through this X-Men era. But it also holds a lot of that classic stuff. And, has the big team-up moments. It's just so dang good. So, yeah. Go do yourselves a favor. Go read that. Go look at some awesome swords. Please like the video if you enjoyed. Tell me what other X-Men stuff you want me to talk about, because I love talking about the X-Men. So I'll get to it. And yeah, subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And until next time, goodbye.